Okay, this is a follow-up from my last video. Basically, I think I found a method to permanently corrupt and fragment the DYN heap done by corrupting an actor's initialization data, kind of similar to the Wind Waker. Just for reference, I have DME to lock this address to make rod duping easy, so I don't have to actually do it. And then I have this error log to show errors as they happen, to explain things from Dolphin. And then I have this visual memory bar showing the DYN heap right now. It's zoomed in. That'll be more clear as to why later. But basically, if you're familiar with actor duping and actor corruption in TP, you'll know that you can dupe fishing rods, and when you do so, it'll take up space in both DYN and game heaps until, let me fast forward here, you become critical in game, which is roughly like 50 KB max allocation. At that point, you don't have any more space to pull fishing rods, so when we get there, which is now, we'll get this error, this game heap error, where we just basically is saying we don't have enough space to, create another instance of the fishing rod, and at this point you can't dupe anymore. In the Wind Waker, if you're familiar with that, when this case happens, it will try to load the actor info into DYN instead, and create an instance of a corrupted actor, which is different than a TP corrupted actor in this case. And then when DYN is critical in Wind Waker, then they'll only corrupt the initialization data, which is like a small, 52 byte chunk. In TP, they fixed that, so I have game critical, but when I pull another one, I'll get the error, but the info won't show up in DYN, and you'll see a small 50 KB flash of initialization data, but it'll immediately correct itself. So it will not permanently create corrupted actors in TP by pulling more with critical game like Wind Waker does. However, I found a way around that. So I have this state here at Death Mountain Crater where I have corrupted a bunch of actors the TP approach instead for fishing rod dupes. And I'm at here with over 20 corrupted actors, and I have all three heaps a lot lower than usual. Not critical yet, but a lot lower than usual than it normally would be when you just come here. In this specific instance, DYN is way lower than game. So when I pull fishing rods, DYN will become critical before game does, and something interesting happens when that happens. And in this case, it's 5 KB. So at this point now, it's save state. Game is not critical yet. It'll take one more pull to make it critical, but DYN is critical now. And when DYN is critical instead of game, instead we'll get this Zelda heap error over here. And when this happens, it seems like that initialization data of the actor doesn't get cleared up. So every time you pull it, it fills up the DYN heap with that initialization data, that 50-ish byte chunk every single time. And you can do this until you completely exhaust the DYN heap all the way to 0. So my first thought was hey, is that permanent, or would it go away through loading zones? So I have this save state here where you can see these two slots. I mean, just for a reference of their location, this first slot, which is blue, noting that it's a free slot where you can fill stuff up in. It's in between the tool and the Zelda words here, and then this one's kind of at the end of the options. So at this save state, I can pull rods, and it's at the space. It's I'm at a point where those are the next free slots. So when I pull more fishing rods with critical DYN, it'll fill up those slots with initialization data until they're full. Let me do that till they're both fully full. Which is now. Now I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to go through a loading transition, which normally clears up the fishing rod dupes. Now here, and you'll notice, which may be more apparent when I go back and forth between states, but here, those slots are here. Now when I warped away, they're not here anymore. They're still gone. So those the corruption of the initialization data into the DYN heap when DYN is critical is permanent. So this is a new way to permanently corrupt the DYN heap that goes through loading transitions. So that's super interesting. I think leads to more possibilities, although I am a little concerned of its practicality because to get to this point, you already have to put the DYN heap in the game itself in a really critical state where all heaps are low. So there's you don't have a lot of freedom of the slots that you permanently corrupt. You kind of have you get what you get. You don't really get to choose where you fragment. But I'll speak a little bit more to like what I was trying to do with it and where I think it could maybe go. But that's basically it. Basically, there's now a way to permanently corrupt the DYN heap that goes through loading zones by corrupting an actor's initialization data. At least I assume that's what it is, because it behaves very similar to Wind Waker. Maybe it's some other data, but that's just my assumption. Okay, so I've been messing with this the past couple days, and like the first thing that obviously came to my mind was like, hey, like, can we do barrier skip now? Can we just exhaust the DYN heap and make the barrier not load? I think there's a couple issues with that. I don't think it's possible still, unless you had an extremely smart approach, like a smart calculated approach, and even then, I don't know. I just want to get my thoughts out there. So maybe if someone that was smart enough came along, they can give it a try. But just to be clear, definitely TAS only. No chance in hell any of this is RTA viable. To even get to this point in my research required a heavy amount of save states and DME assistance. There's just no way. But let's talk about it a little bit more, I guess. So first thing right off the bat that kind of makes this really annoying is that to get to Northern Castletown, you have to go through Central Castletown. And Central Castletown is a lot more actor dense than Northern Castletown, so I have a save state here where there's no corruption at all. But, you know, there's 1,200 free here, 650 free here for these two heaps. But, you know, when you go into Northern Castletown, it's a lot higher. And this compounds on the fact that when you actually do corruption, it has a much greater effect on Central Castletown than does Northern Castletown, because, again, there's so much more actors. So I have a bunch of corruption here, you know, 155 free dying space, 350 free game space. But when I go into Northern Castletown, it's still like way higher at like 850 and 1300. So like the approach of just, you know, brute force exhausting, you know, corrupting dying to the point of exhaustion and then, you know, getting the barrier from there is just not viable, because you could never get to a state close enough in this map without crashing Castletown first, or Central Castletown first. There's just no way. The second thing is like you don't have a lot of freedom over where you could insert that initialization data unless you're extremely smart and plan super far ahead in advance. So you'll see here, you know, whenever you corrupt the initialization data, it'll just slowly eat up whatever free space in the DYN heap. So now the DYN heap is fully zoomed out. This is the entire view of the DYN heap. So like theoretically, if I were able to do the DYN initialization data corruption right now, it'd just fill up this space slowly. However, like when you get to that point of being able to do that, which is here, the DYN heap is already so exhausted that it's like barely like, let me zoom in more. But like it's barely like, this is like a factor, it went from a factor of 10 to 1 to 1 to 1.1 for the scaling. And there's like these tiny baby free slots of blue where you can fill up now that are barely anything, and you have no freedom over where they really are once you start corrupting things. So like you can only really insert it here and here, but you know there's this whole space where ideally you have a lot of freedom of where you want to insert that data to fragment the heap better. But we just don't have that ability. Like it would require an insane amount of forward thinking to, like, at this stage where you haven't done anything yet, to, you know, corrupt very specific actors in specific areas and specific memory locations to like strategically corrupt and fragment the DYN heap early on, so that when you get to this point, it's not so rigid and like, oh, it can only go here and it can only go here. Like you'd have more freedom of where to do it. In that case, you'd have a smarter fragmentation to hopefully have a more strategic approach of fragmenting where it'd have less of an effect here and more of an effect in Northern Castletown. But like that is way beyond my scope and potentially isn't even still possible. Like even if you do all that, it's still possible that you could never get Northern Castletown in a state to unload the barrier while still not also crashing Central Castletown. But I just want to throw that out there. So like, if anyone wanted to try it who was smart enough. So I'm not smart enough to do it. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you.